Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you all today. A quick, detailed introduction about myself, if I may. I currently work in Sutherland, and before Sutherland, I was with organizations like Capgemini, Bosch, and Wipro. The work that I do on a day in and day out basis is to manage all talent processes for the organization. I'm also responsible for organization development, taking care of employees' development needs, in other words, learning and development, and the pillar of inclusion and diversity. I've been around in the industry for about 15 years. And this topic today that I wanted to talk to you all about is unconscious biases. A very interesting topic, a topic that I'm sure you all must have, heard a word that's been used, abused, but let me tell you that this is something where we need to have more discussions, where we need to have more dialogues, and where we need to have more participation in terms of really understanding unconscious biases and how they impact talent decisions. So coming back to the topic at hand, like I said, that this is a topic which I think needs a lot of talking about and discussions. So let's quickly dive in into the presentation. All right, so on your screen right now, you can see an image, and in my mind, this could potentially be the most diverse image. And I would like you all to take a quick moment, use the chat window, and tell me what are the different kinds of diversity that you're spotting in this image. And then we'll take the discussion from there. So what are the different types of diversity that you are spotting in this image? Okay, I'm seeing some responses already. Age, physical ability, gender, culture, level, gender, nationalities. All right, race, okay. Age, gender, thank you, Savitri. Thank you, Pavul. Anything else? All right, great. Color, yes, absolutely. So what is it that we see here? Yes, thank you, Jawahar. Age, level, culture, gender, region, absolutely. So mind you that the various types of diversity that you just pointed out right now are the forms of diversity that are visible to the eye. All right. There are various types of diversities that are not exactly visible to the eye. And it could be various types of disabilities, for example. How many of you know that there are so many blood disorders like thalassemia, for example, or sickle cell disease? They're not really visible when you meet a person, but this is something that really impacts a person's quality of life and is a disability according to the law in India, right? There could be somebody suffering from HIV/AIDS. That's a disability in many countries. What you can't see right now here is maybe people who come from different sexual preferences. So there could be people from the LGBTQ community, right? So when you see them instantly, you may not be able to understand, but these are the various types. Okay. Tirumaran is saying I need to speak louder, so I hope this is better. And if somebody can confirm on the chat button that my, yeah, all right, so this is better. Thank you. All right, so coming back to where I left it was that there are various types of diversities that are invisible to the eye. And those are typically few forms of disabilities. Those are people coming from different socio-economic backgrounds. I mean, of course, if there's somebody who's very, very rich, it would appear very clearly, but then there are few humble souls, billionaires, trillionaires, and they still have very, very humble ways of dressing and lifestyle. So those are also some forms of diversities. Now, why am I talking about diversity? Because unconscious bias is something which is the biggest roadblock, if I may put it that way, to diversity and inclusion. Now, what is diversity and what is inclusion? Diversity is the head count that you have in your organization or in the country or in a school. For example, the number of women is to men, the number of transgender people, the number of people who are from the gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual community. Are you employing people from Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, baby boomers, right? So these are all various types of diversity. So diversity essentially is your composition of different cohorts in your overall head count. Now, what does inclusion mean? Inclusion means making the heads count. I hope you're able to understand. Diversity is the head count, and inclusion is making the heads count, which means creating a sense of belongingness in the organization, creating a sense of inclusion, allowing each and every person, each and every team member, each and every employee to come to work with their 100% authentic self. If you are able to create an atmosphere like that, that is what is called inclusion. Many of you, especially those in HR who joined today, you may run a lot of employee engagement surveys, right? Employee satisfaction surveys, employee engagement surveys, employee experience surveys. You will definitely find, and if it isn't there, then I would urge you to go back and implement it or speak with your HR to implement it. A question to employees that how included do I feel? How belonged do I feel in the workplace? That question is so critical because the response that you will get will let you know how inclusive you are as an organization. Now, like I mentioned, that the biggest roadblock that prevents diversity and inclusion from really happening is unconscious bias. And this is what we want to talk about today. Okay, so there's sufficient research, and it's just a click away. You just have to plug in why is diversity good, and there are so many solid research studies that you can read, which is that an organization that has diverse teams versus an organization that has homogeneous teams, if you compare the business results, you can easily see that in terms of top line, bottom line, revenues, a company with a diverse team does way better than a company that does not have diversity in its employees. Okay. Organizations with diversity are more innovative. I mean, when you have a team which comprises of people from all walks of life, different experiences, different experiences, different backgrounds, you have a team that is likely to have a higher IQ than a team that is very homogeneous. And what happens when you have people from different walks of life, again, higher IQ, you have an organization that is more innovative. Again, there are various examples one could give where organizations did not embrace diversity and eventually perished because they were not able to innovate. So that's how important diversity is. Your customers are diverse, right? So if you are an organization like my organization, Sutherland, right? Today, Sutherland has customers from various different parts of the world. We have customers who are people with disabilities. We have customers who are Americans, Europeans, Indians, Asians, Caucasians. We have customers who are men, who are women. We have customers of various different, types and kinds. And if we as an organization are not diverse, it's very hard for us to understand the needs, the expectations of our customers and how to fulfill them. So this is, I think, the most no-brainer, if I may put it, reason why diversity is important in an organization. I mean, it's very simple. Think about it. If you are a company that's manufacturing washing machines, correct? And you have only men who are designing this product. And you have not thought about the end user who is in all likelihood going to be a woman. Of course, today the washing machine is used by both men and women, but let's not kid ourselves. A woman uses it more than a man. It's only now, maybe during the COVID times, that a man is participating more as compared to the pre-COVID and lockdown era. But this example of mine, similarly, car makers today, right? They just don't think about a man. They have to think about the woman who plays an equal role in the car purchase decision, the child of the house, who's also playing a big role, because today's kids, they have way so much more information. So therefore, a car maker, if for example, an Audi or a Volkswagen is comprised of only men engineers, then I'm not sure that they'll get the product specs right, which actually is being bought by a diverse set of customers. So again, your customers are diverse, and therefore diversity is important in your organization. And yeah, lack of diversity is a significant performance cost. We spoke about it. And unconscious bias, like I mentioned a little while ago, is the biggest roadblock. So let's talk a little about unconscious biases now. Okay. So this is, I think, a very, very simple question in front of your screens, and I will request Swati and Vijulal to quickly collate this for us. Again, go back to the chat window, and why don't you all take a simple tab at this question. Are you biased? So just answer, yes, I'm biased, no, I'm not biased, maybe I'm biased, right? So yes, no, maybe are your three options. Why don't you start plugging your responses now? Okay, consciously no, maybe. Who would say no? Maybe I'm biased unconsciously. Okay. Okay, I'm trying not to. Okay, so it's just, guys, a yes, no, maybe. That's all.
Actually, 50% of them have the opinion maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So interesting. Interesting. Most of you are saying maybe you are biased, which gives me a feeling that you also feel that no, in many instances I'm not biased. Some people have used the word conscious, which is very important, because right now we are talking about unconscious biases. So it's a very good point somebody has brought about. There are a lot of you who are saying no as well, and really that's very interesting to note. Okay, good, thank you very much. We'll move to the next slide. Okay, now my request here is that if you know who this person is, if you know the answer, please just hold on for 10 seconds. My question is very specifically for those of you here who've not been familiar with this picture before. If you're familiar with this picture, I would request you to just hold on for a few more seconds. But those of you who haven't seen this picture before, my question to you is that this is a picture of a cricketer, okay? And and a famous cricketer. Can you take a guess as to who this person is? This is their childhood picture. Can you take a guess as to who this person is? Yes, Dave says Muhammad Azharuddin. Fantastic. Azhar, okay. Keep it coming, keep it coming, keep it coming. It's fun. Okay, Azhar. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I need a few more responses. Nobody's saying Virat Kohli or Sachin. Of course, Sachin's curly hair is missing here. Okay, all right. Oh my God, the women are getting it right, actually. Okay, so what's happening here? So the tendency, the moment I said cricketer, the tendency is to immediately start guessing this particular individual. And I don't know if my, yeah. So immediately people start guessing this particular individual. Some would say Virat Kohli, some would say Azhar, some would say any other cricketer. But in reality, this is, one moment, please. Yeah. This is Mithali Raj. So for those of you who do not know who she is, she's the captain of the Indian women's national cricket team. She is a right-handed opening batter. She's often regarded as India's greatest female batter. She's the highest run scorer in women's international cricket and the only female cricketer to surpass the 6,000 run mark in women's one-day international matches. So this has been an interesting activity of unconscious bias, and I think you know, if I could have waited for a little longer, then I would love to have seen the other responses coming in. Okay. All right, so Deepthi makes a very interesting point. I would have guessed it as a male cricketer, but since we are talking about biases, I was consciously drawn towards looking at the girl. Yes, Deepthi, thanks for being conscious. Thanks for being intentional. Okay, let's move to the next one. So in the previous slide, I showed you an image. I asked you to guess the person. Now I'm not showing you an image. I'm just describing the person to you. And I would like you all to kind of take a guess as to who this person could be. And I know we don't know the names of cardiologists offhand. I mean, I just know one or two offhand. But I want you guys to use this option to tell me how old this person could be, or where this person could, you know, is this person, could this be? Okay, somebody has said Abdul Kalam. Okay, is this person Indian or somebody from outside India? Could this be a woman? What could be the age of this person? So on and so forth. Okay. I need a few up. Okay. Okay, Amita is clearly stealing my thunder here. So this person here is Akash Manoj. Yes, he is from Tamil Nadu. So unconscious bias is also when we read about a person's description and immediately try to figure out in our minds the age of the person, the stature, the education of the person. So this is Akash, and he's a cardiology researcher from Tamil Nadu, and when his grandfather passed away, he decided to take it upon himself to do research on silent heart attacks, because that's how his grandfather passed away. And he developed a novel technique that can non-invasively detect and alert at-risk patients of asymptomatic heart attack potential, right? So this is Akash Manoj. And thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this. Okay, so those of you who said maybe I have unconscious biases, those of you who said no, I don't have unconscious biases, I'm sorry to say, but everyone has biases. And we human beings, we all think that, we are the most objective and rational human beings. Unfortunately, the reality is different. Um, in fact, human beings are, quite irrational in the way we make our decisions, in the way we look at life. Our brains have been conditioned over several centuries about this, and this is, you may look at it as a software that, we have developed in our brains, a software whose goal is to keep us alive. So it's an evolutionary thing, but before that, if you have a brain, then you have a bias, period. End of debate. And there are more than 250 different types of biases that impair our judgment, that impair our decision-making process. Biases are helpful. So let's not look at it as something that is absolutely to be, eliminated completely. Biases have been helpful, and we'll talk about it. And eliminating bias is not possible easily. So what I want to tell you all is that after this session today, I don't claim to, make this statement that after this training, after this 1 hour session, I will be able to eliminate biases from your minds. Therefore, those of you in HR, those of you who are managers in teams, those of you who have anybody on this call, let me tell you that the idea is to not eliminate biases, but to help people recognize them, right? So if you go with a mission, if you're an HR trainer, and if you go with a vision that after the session, I will eliminate biases in my participants, they will go back feeling like the most rational human beings. It could be possible, but for a very short duration, our biases are likely to come back again. So therefore, a training is just the first step to making people familiar about biases. There are a few other things that one needs to do, which we'll cover towards the end of the presentation today. So biases, why are biases helpful? So it's a very evolutionary thing, right? Biases in a lot of situations have helped us stay alive, has helped us take quick decisions. A bias also is kind of helpful when we need to make a lot of decisions. We need to do a lot of cognitive thinking. At that point in time, to save time and effort, we sometimes use our perception, sometimes use our judgments, also slash biases, and we quickly make a decision. So when we are in a hurry, when we need to get something done, when we have pressure of timelines, those are times when biases have turned out to be helpful in getting past, but again, it has a flip side as well. So let's move to the next slide. So what exactly are unconscious biases? So, I would say unconscious biases, they happen automatically and, are triggered by our brain making quick judgments and opinions about people and situations. These biases trigger off when your preference towards or preference against something impacts. Unconscious biases occur mostly when we are under pressure, when we are multitasking, or simply when we are in a hurry. So that's the time when unconscious biases are likely to, trigger up. Mental shortcuts are needed for all of us. I mean, researchers say that people are bombarded with close to 11 million pieces of information at a time, but the brain can consciously process only 40 pieces of information, right? So therefore, the brain needs to take mental shortcuts on a daily basis. I mean, what do you have to eat? How, when you're tying your shoelace, is it the right foot first? Is it the left foot first? So there's so many decisions we are taking. And each of them is a mental shortcut, and a lot of them are determined by unconscious biases. Now, where do unconscious biases come from? So we spoke about what are unconscious biases. So where do they come from? Like I mentioned, it's like a software. It's kind of hardwired into us, and is a result of the way we have, we've been raised, the locality in which we've been raised, how our parents have raised us, our life experiences, what we've gone through from our childhood till now, what our preferences are. These are the various things that determine our unconscious biases, from where they arrive, right? So examples of some characteristics you may have unconsciously a preference for or a preference against are these, and you all spotted them in the first slide, where you have disabilities, where you may have a preference for or against gender identity, age, ethnicity, intellect, sexual orientation, personality, ethnicity, race, color are all the various characteristics for which you may have a preference for or a preference against. Okay, now I would like to spend a little time on the neuroscience of bias. Now, what is neuroscience? Brain science, right? So it's an interesting theory that I was introduced to when I was going through one of the webinars by Neuro Leadership Institute. And I kind of understood that how does the brain normally behave when it encounters a new or an unfamiliar situation, right? So whenever faced with a choice to make, the brain first fires up the threat response, okay? So even if a situation has a reward, right, attached to it, that you do it and there is a reward at the end of it, but because the situation is new or the situation is unfamiliar, what the brain first does is it doesn't focus much on the reward. Immediately, it fires up the threat response. So, so what happens is that threat, so even though reward is a better situation, threat becomes stronger. And in other words, through this slide, I would like to just share one important point, that the threat response is nothing but the brain's self-defense mechanism. Therefore, whenever you feel that unconscious biases are clouding your judgment, it is basically the brain's way of survival. That whenever we see something different or a species that is different from us, immediately the threat response gets triggered. And of course, then it triggers the amygdala, which prepares us to fight or flight, which means we either fight this person, or if it's a dangerous animal in front of us, we flee from the situation, we take flight from the situation. So several centuries ago, right, when man used to roam around in jungles, trying to gather food, trying to find places of dwelling, at that point in time, if man would see another man from maybe a different community that doesn't look like him, or maybe an animal that is potentially, we don't even know if the animal is going to attack the man, but yes, the man has pretty much figured out that this is a threat. So through the threat trigger firing up, this is what has passed down to us, to you, to me, that whenever we see something which is not like us. So for example, if I'm a man and I'm interviewing a woman, the woman is different, I'm different, right? So the threat response triggers. Oh my God, is she going to ask for too many days off? What if she gets married? What if she needs maternity break? What if? So all those biases that cloud our judgment all come from centuries ago, where the brain has learned how to trigger off a decision making quickly, either through threat or reward mechanism. Um, Again, I would like you guys to take a minute and through the chat window help me understand that when I said centuries ago, man would either fight or be cautious, right? Be cautious and not fight, maybe hide away in the cave, or maybe not really attack the animal, not fight the other human being. So I want you to take a guess that which kind of people survived those centuries. The people who looked at it from a threat standpoint and kind of stayed back and didn't fight the animal, or the people who decided to fight to kill the animal or to kill the other human being. I just want you to take a quick minute and type in the chat window which kind of people you feel survived those harsh times. Okay, I can see some chats coming in. The flight survived, okay. Survival of fittest, people who fight. Okay, Deepti is saying those who avoided the situation, they survived. Anu is saying those who avoided survived. Fight. Okay, Jawahar is always giving answers. Sometimes, this time, no, just tell me what you think it is. So, okay, fight, 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 yes. All right, so mixed responses, and the answer is that those people who actually did not fight, they survived, right? So those who looked at the threat and thought, let us fight it, also got killed in the process of the fight, right? So that is why the brain has got conditioned to look at every situation, to look at every person, to look at any circumstance with a little bit of a judgmental lens. And that is where the origin of unconscious biases come, where at any point, if you feel that unconscious biases are clouding your judgment, tell yourself that it's the brain's natural way of survival. But at the same time, recognize that it should not have detrimental effects in the way you go about making your decisions. So this was about neuroscience of bias. Okay. Yes, the scared gene survived. Yes, clearly you've attended several unconscious bias trainings before. All right. So, like I mentioned, that there are more than 250, 300 types of biases, but the biases which I feel I encounter as an HR person every day when I'm trying to bring in diversity and inclusion into the organization, I've listed down 4 or 5 of those biases. We'll talk about them, and then I would really like to hear your thoughts also through the chat window on uh, some examples that you may have faced when I speak about those biases. If you have any examples, I'd love to hear them. So please put them in the chat window. All right. So like I mentioned that eliminating biases is not really easy. It is very, very difficult. So the first thing we need to do is to start labeling those biases proactively, so that we are more aware and we can figure out mitigating ways of eliminating those biases when we are in a decision-making process. So the first one that comes to my mind is the affinity bias or the similarity bias. And I find this statement very, very profound. I've used it in the past, and I think it's very, very profound. That, tell me, what do you feel? I mean, don't you think that generally we like people who are like us or who like us? You get what I'm saying? So generally we tend to like people who are either like us or who like us, which means that they agree with whatever we are saying and they're basically your yes man. So this is a bias that we call as affinity bias or similarity bias. So what does this mean? This bias basically is when you unconsciously prefer people who share qualities with you or people you like. Okay. Now it occurs because, again, your brain sees them as familiar and relatable, and we all want to be around people we can relate to. Correct? So I remember when 15 years ago, not 15, 17 years ago, when I left my hometown in Assam to come to Bangalore to complete my MBA. Constantly the brain is searching for people from my part of the country. I mean, I'm not even I'm a Bengali, right? So I'm not even looking for a Bengali. My brain is just searching for somebody who is either from North India, East India, somebody with whom there is some bit of relatability, right? So I remember constantly there was once where I saw a person's surname as Das, right? And I was so excited. Das could either be a Bengali or could be a person from Odisha. And I run to him and hey, are you from the eastern part of the country? And then he says, no, I'm a Malayali. So I'm like, oh, okay. So that's how the brain is constantly craving for relatability. So, so again, think about the time when you were growing up, right? You are at your dinner table, lunch table, whatever table, and you have your parents and you have your grandparents sitting next to you. I mean, did you not hear uh, certain advices from them, like stay with like-minded people? Or if you are a bright student, constantly your parents and your grandparents may have urged you that I want you to just be with the bright student gang. Or if you're from a certain religion, your parents or grandparents might have told you that, stick with people who are our people, right? So this our people, your people, right? So this is something which we have got exposed to from the time that we have grown. In fact, some of our English also taught us birds of the same feather flock together, right? So again, we talk about race, for example. I mean, if you're an American and uh, yesterday, I was watching this documentary on Michelle Obama's book called Becoming, right? So there she spoke about so many biases against African Americans, where neighborhoods predominantly with whites. The moment an African American household would enter that neighborhood, immediately the real estate cost would, just drop down, because that was the extent of bias, that these are maybe not good people, or these are maybe not safe people. So that's been the kind of bias. And while growing up, she's seen that bias where the white folks, their parents, their grandparents said, just stick with white friends and to stay away from the maybe African Americans. So that's how all of it really came together. So this morning, in fact, I was very I was very sad when I heard about the murder of an African American called Ahmed Arduri. And I don't know how many of you have heard the news story, which is all he was doing, African American youth. He was just running. He was having his, normal morning run, and two white Americans, they thought he was up to something, and in broad daylight he was murdered. So this is a bias against a certain race. So coming back, um, what happens at the workplace on affinity bias? It's like when you want to interview somebody, you have two candidates in front of you. One candidate who maybe comes from the place you belong, or may have studied in a school that you're familiar with, or maybe you studied in that school, shares your kind of interests, like you like volleyball, the person likes volleyball or basketball, basically a ball kind of game, versus another candidate who may not be from your similar background. And the second candidate, in terms of academics, in terms of experience, is way more uh, better than the first candidate. So automatically, the brain should ideally choose the second candidate, but no, an unconscious bias has already kicked in our brains, which is called the affinity bias. And this is one bias which definitely you can mitigate by bringing in more people in the decision-making process. Very simple. If you have to interview somebody, make sure you are not the only decision maker. Involve three, four more people, make it a panel interview or make it a series of interviews, so that in this way, this particular bias can get addressed. You will also see this even within employee base in your organization, where because of affinity bias, you will see people who are forming in groups versus out groups, right? So this image that you see, in group are a set of people who are the so-called like-minded, or those who have similar interests and like to stick together, and there are few who are always left out. The second bias is the confirmation bias, and of course the availability bias. So the confirmation bias is very common when we want to make a hurried decision, or when we experience a high cognitive load, which means that there are too many things to decide, there's a lot of pressure, and that is when the confirmation bias kicks in. So confirmation bias refers to how people search for bits of uh, information rather than looking at the whole picture. So it leads to selective observation, which means that you overlook other information, even to an extent that you're rejecting new information that is contradicting your initial evidence. Simple things like, if you, again, an interview situation, one candidate turns up late by 10 minutes, and he or she has an absolutely genuine reason to provide, uh, your mind is made up, because you are somebody who loves to be on time, extremely disciplined. And even though the gentleman reached the office on time, but because your housekeeping or security or front office executive took time to show him to the interview room, which is not his problem, still in your mind, you have kind of made up an impression that this is a person who is going to come late most of the time. And therefore, if I hire him tomorrow, he is going to miss most of his deadlines, and he is going to be delayed in every piece of work that I give him. So this is a typical confirmation bias. Moving on to the next one, which is which is attribution bias. Okay, so most of our disagreements, if you see, with our partners, our siblings, our friends, our co-workers, are often happening because we feel that our perception is the correct perception. Our perception is the accurate perception. In other words, my reality is the reality. Okay, so what does attribution bias mean? It's also, by the way, known as the self-serving bias. So this bias is, okay, let me give you an example. So think of yourself in an airport, right? I know it's hard for you to think of it right now that you're in an airport, but just think of yourself in the airport and there's this long queue, no social distancing. It's the pre-COVID, example. I'm requesting you to visualize. So there's a long queue and you're also in that queue for check-in, and there is somebody who's in a big hurry and who cuts past the queue and goes ahead of you to the check-in counter, right? I mean, how do you feel? You feel angry, you feel agitated, right? I mean, you might be thinking in your mind, what kind of a idiot is this person? What kind of a jerk is this person? It doesn't have the basic, doesn't have the basic etiquette to be in a queue. But then after a week, you're in the same queue in the airport, all right? And you're in a hurry and you start cutting the queue and you want to be right ahead at the check-in counter. So once you finish the check-in process, you tell yourself, no, that's okay. I was in a hurry. I would have missed my flight, and it's perfectly fine that I did this. But the reality is that the guy previous week who was trying to cut the queue and move ahead of you also had the same reality, which is he too would be missing his flight. So the situation is the same, and the situation is the same, but what somebody else does doesn't go down well with you. But the same thing when you do it is perfectly justifiable, which means that my reality is the reality, right? So this is attribution bias, and one way for you to, in fact, I really want to talk about the team of rivals. I don't know how many of you read this book. It's about Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln, was a smart man, right? So anytime he had to make a decision, he would actually invite people who he knew would disagree with his point of view. So he would consciously bring in people who he knew would disagree, just so that he could make the entire decision-making process as more rich and more holistic. It's not that he brought those people so that he could lean on to whatever they're suggesting, no. It's just about getting an absolute holistic picture. So Abraham Lincoln did this very well, where he was able to beat the attribution bias in several political decisions that he had to make. This book, I think, won a Pulitzer, or one of those awards, right? Okay, the next one is the loss aversion bias, right? So what's the loss aversion bias? In cognitive psychology and decision theory, loss aversion refers to people's emotional tendency to prefer avoiding losses. And of course, how that bias makes those people see the reality. So let me give you an example. Suppose a friend of yours has gifted you a $200 wine bottle, right? So how happy are you? You're happy. You've just received a 200 dollar bottle wine, uh, which is nice. Now, unfortunately, you drop that bottle, right? So what happens is that you are so if you felt an emotion of X while receiving the bottle, in all likelihood, when the bottle broke, your emotion is almost 2x, which means that the bottle of wine which you didn't buy, somebody else gave it to you, gave you a certain happiness or satisfaction. The the unhappiness or the dissatisfaction, if the same bottle which you did not buy was gifted fell broke, is way much more higher. So this is what the Kahneman and Tversky have written, saying losses loom larger than gains, where we tend to look at the losses more than the gains. So there's a lot of research. A gambling example. If a person is given $50 that you can keep $20 and call it a day, or you can use all the $50 to gamble, and it's a 50-50 situation. The tendency of people is to take the $20 and call it a day. Okay. Now, the same situation worded a little differently is when you meet the person and you say, here is $50 and you will lose $30. So you can lose $30, or you can gamble the $50 and it's a 50-50 situation. So what's happening? Both situations are the same. It's just being worded different. In the second instance, research has found out that people have actually taken the $50 and gambled. Because in the first instance of gaining $20 versus the second instance of losing $30, the loss aversion bias took over. So I just thought I'll quickly explain what loss aversion bias is. And many a times, this plays a role in our decision making in talent processes. I'll give you another example. There is a manager who knows that his team member or her team member is not great, is mediocre. But he keeps giving this individual a rating of exceeds expectations, of a good rating. Why? Because he's worried that if he does not give the right, a good rating, this mediocre individual will resign, and the cost of hiring him, the pain that he has to undergo of again looking at so many CVs and hiring, interviewing people, and then waiting for 3 months notice for those candidates to serve and join. So immediately in the mind, every manager is doing that quick calculation, that giving a rating which is keeping my employee happy versus giving the right rating, rubbing the employee in a wrong way. I wouldn't say rubbing the employee in a wrong way, because he or she truly deserves that rating. And if it leads to an attrition, so be it. So this is one other area where the loss aversion bias can be clearly seen. Okay, moving on to the last, two other biases. So the other bias, and I would like you all to, those of you in HR, those of you managers, right? There's a bias called availability bias, right? So if, for example, there are two candidates who are up for promotion, and of course there's just one promotion target number available, and you have two candidates. Both are in your organization, of course. One is a great performer, great innovator, thinks out of the box, clearly is ready for the next level role. but this person works remotely. You don't get to see him every day. And there's another candidate who is not great, but good for the role. And this is a person that you see every day at work. Maybe works with you, maybe works with a different manager, doesn't matter, but you're seeing this person day in and day out. So the tendency that we have observed is that the availability bias kicks in, where the recommendation goes very strongly to promote the person that a leader is seeing in office every day, even though there is somebody else who is much better than this particular candidate. So those who are closer to us in time and space, we tend to be biased towards them. So again, one way for you to mitigate this bias is to remove distance as an element in this equation, which means that you need to maybe close your eyes, take a step back, and ask yourself that if both of them were remote workers, virtually working, would I still give the person, the guy who comes to office every day, the promotion? Just asking yourself this simple question will immediately help you recognize that there is a bias playing in your mind. The last bias here is what we call the appearance bias. I think on one side, we learning and development professionals, we do a lot of training programs where we tell people about how to groom well, how to look well, power dressing, executive presence, dress to kill, and all those other kind of messages. But at the same time, we are also dealing with a bias where people who do not look beautiful, do not look handsome, do not look presentable, often miss out on a lot of opportunities. Today, if you Google, you will see that the average CEO is 2 inches taller than others. So it means that if you are fairer, if you are taller, if you are leaner, these physical biases have oftentimes impaired people's judgment, and it has kind of given a notion that if you are tall, if you are fair, you will get the next promotion, right? Or you will become the next CEO. So this is a bias. Again, we need to be very careful about. Beauty should lie several layers within, which means that do not write off a person just by, of course, I mean, if a person comes up shabbily dressed, of course, you would judge the person. But if a person is not tall, if a person is not thin, if a person is not fair, if a person is not beautiful according to your beauty standards, then what would you what kind of questions would you ask yourself to make sure that this bias is something that is not overtaking your judgment, your decision making judgment. So I think these are some of the biases, 6 of them, which I listed here, which I keep encountering. It's happened with myself as an individual, or it is something that I see happening with employees or with team members. So so in my mind, and I would like to invite those of you who are on the chat, through the chat window, that in my mind, these are the various talent decisions that can be impacted. Do you think there are other decisions that can be impacted through unconscious biases? Please list them down so that I can add it to my deck. But I've given a lot of examples of where biases play a role in hiring, right? I think all my examples were predominantly hiring. So this is definitely a key area where we may prefer more men versus women. We may prefer more whites as preferred to people of color. We may prefer more youngsters than people who have gray hair. I mean, a lot of biases in hiring. Performance management, again, This is one other area where if you are in HR or if you are connected to HR, I would highly recommend that you take a look at your performance management appraisal ratings of the last 1 to 2 years. I am quite sure there will be a lot of data that will give you insights as to unconscious biases happening. The most common unconscious bias is towards women, where you tend to give the meets expectations rating more to women as compared to men. So if you look at the exceeds expectations rating, generally you will find more men there as compared to women. Promotions. Again, those of you in HR or even those of you who are managers, and I would say review your past few quarters of promotion data, insert the gender column, insert a few other diversity columns. And I'm sure that again, you will get some insights as to some unconscious biases probably creeping in. Succession planning, right? And succession planning, as we all know, is predominantly at the C-suite level, where who is your next CEO, who is your next CXO, or who is your next CXO minus one, right? So again, today the challenge is with people of color, with lesser women being chosen for leadership roles. So succession planning in my mind is also, and I can see some chat blinking going on. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to take those questions. I think some interesting insights are coming through the chat option as well. Okay. So I think these are some of the talent decisions. There are many more. Pay is one more. In fact, I forgot to mention it. Pay. So again, it's an absolute no-brainer. People should be paid for the work they do, not whether they are a man or a woman or a person with disability or somebody else, right? So what you can do in your organization, if you have the ability, is to push for a pay parity survey that look at similar job families and look at the median salaries and look at the male, female, or any other form of diversity. It could be a white American versus a person of color, right? Those other dimensions you can bring in. And at least from a gender pay parity standpoint, there's a huge disparity. Today in the United States, every woman is paid anywhere between 60 cents to 70 cents as compared to a male colleague who's making $1. So that's the kind of difference of pay. So this is also another area where generally, while deciding who will get how much raise, unconscious biases in the minds of predominantly male managers kicks in. And that's the reason year after year after year, when you see the data, you will see a big gap. So you cannot fix the gap right now, but the first thing you can do is at least start with a pay parity audit, and then try fixing it in maybe 2 to 3 years. I wouldn't even say 3 years, fix it quickly. But again, it's a matter of budget. So take at least 2 years and fix the delta. How to address unconscious biases. I think I pretty much covered most of it just right now, but let me just share some of the things which I feel has worked for me in the organizations wherever I've worked. Use decision guides, which means that give targets to your managers, okay? Give targets to your talent acquisition teams, right? Give targets to your complement team that keep looking for a certain percentage of people that you want to promote. Keep looking at a certain regular basis of pay parity audit, that it should not be even done once a year. You should actually be refreshing the data on a 6 months basis if you have a 6 monthly pay cycle going on in your organization. While hiring, right? If you are in a recruitment role, give a proper questionnaire to your hiring manager or to the recruiter. Those questions will help the hiring manager to keep his unconscious biases at bay and focus only on what is needed from this individual. So there are, in many seminars I'm asked that, Simi, why do we have targets? Why do we have goals for diversity? And my only answer to them is that unfortunately, diversity and inclusion does not come organically. And I gave you a long history, right? I spoke to you about neuroscience of the brain. I told you the threat, reward, and our upbringing, our parents telling us. So what happens is that organically we are not wired to go out proactively and start hiring diverse candidates. So we are not, right? And therefore, as HR, in fact, I wouldn't even say HR, your top management should put forward the diversity goals. And hopefully, as we keep getting tuned to hiring people from diverse backgrounds, this will then become a norm of the day. And after maybe, who knows, after a few years, we may not need targets and goals to keep us honest to this vision, right? But right now, I think it is very, very important because diversity does not come organically to us. Remove biases from processes. Very important to review your HR policies, your hiring policies, and your promotion policies, and your succession planning policies. There are a host of policies. I think try to remove bias as much as possible from each of the processes. Remove the triggers. Now, this is very important. So how many of you know of this particular technology, this company called Textio, right? Now, Textio is an augmented writing application which helps you figure out unconscious biases in your job description. So what does that mean? If we are in recruitment or if we are the hiring manager, we tend to write a job description. But when the same job description is being viewed by a male versus a woman, different perceptions about this job is emerging. So simple words like action driven. A male would be more excited to apply, whereas a woman may start wondering, what does this mean? So just the word action can actually become detrimental or may trigger some sort of thought process when your candidates are reading the job description. I'm not saying women are not action oriented. All I'm saying is that when you use the words like, in a caring environment, come join us in a caring environment, just that word caring becomes a word which draws more women applications, right? So we all know when we join, we have to be action oriented, goal driven, result oriented. But just sometimes if we can just remove those words, because honestly, those words really mean nothing in a job description. So Textio is an application which Sutherland, we are speaking with this organization and hopefully we'll be able to use their services soon. Is definitely an app that you can use to remove biases. The other is when you have resumes to send to your hiring managers, right? So see if you can just redact the name of the person, because the name of the person gives out a lot of information. It can give out which part of the country I may belong to. It may give out my gender. It might give out, I don't know. I mean, these are the two things which I feel my name could give out. And there are a lot of unconscious biases kicking in at the review stage. So try doing this where you redact the name, redact the interest, because sometimes I feel even hobbies and interests could be redacted from the CV. Because again, a lot of confirmation bias is affinity bias is happening where, oh, I see somebody, I like volleyball and this person is also a sports person and I tend to want to interview this person, right? So, so try removing triggers. Look at your dress code policy. Look at so many other policies that you have to remove biases, keep targets, use decision guides. And the one thing which I would really urge you all to think about is what happens post-COVID, right? A different set of biases are likely to emerge. And I would like you all to think about it because I'm also thinking about it. Would there be a lot of unconscious bias against Asians, against Chinese? Because if you see so many news channels are constantly using the word Wuhan virus. They don't say coronavirus. They're constantly saying Wuhan virus. President Trump has said the Chinese virus, right? So we all know what this virus has done to our economy, to our lives, to so many things that are not going well right now. So so keep an open mind and see how things look like post COVID when we kind of come back to normalcy. Check for unconscious biases happening, newer unconscious biases surfacing, so on and so forth. So with this, thank you very much. I come to the end of my session. If you would like to be in touch with me, this is my work email ID and my personal email ID. I would love for each one of you to please connect with me on LinkedIn. So just type Simi Chaudhary, you will get me. And do share your feedback on how you felt this session was and what I could do to make it better next time around. Okay, so if there are questions, I'm happy to take questions at this point. So Namrata, I don't know if you're still around. You have asked, can you share a few insights on unconscious bias towards people with disabilities? A lot of unconscious biases. I think the overall notion that these are people who take more number of holidays or sick leaves is the first big notion that we have, which is sometimes not true. These are people who cannot work 100% of their productivity. That also is also not justified or isn't a statistic that I've read anywhere. So what I do in my organization, Amrita, is that whenever I'm reviewing the appraisal ratings of the entire organization, I of course bring in a gender element. I also bring in a person with disability status. Many a times I have seen that even though a person is doing a good job, gets a mediocre rating. So then I pass this information on to HR saying, HR, take a quick look and see that there are no unconscious biases against this set of people. So there are various unconscious biases, and like I said, having some policing helps us stay honest to our goal of removing unconscious biases. Okay. I don't see any more questions. I'm happy to hang around for some more time in case there are. Welcome, Namrata. I would really like to get feedback on this session, and therefore, please, please, get connected if we are already not connected on LinkedIn, and please do share your feedback. Tell me about your examples, and tell me also your perception on what you feel would be a different set of biases post-COVID era, because I'm really keen to know how things might change. A lot of biases that we have about people of different generations, right? The Gen Y, Gen Z, the youngsters, the millennials, who we keep saying are self-obsessed and the instant and the constant gratification that they seek. They want more promotions, they want more success, they want more of everything, because while growing up, they've never heard the word no from their parents, right? So again, these set of people are also experiencing job losses, experiencing pay cuts, experiencing furloughs, and something tells me that the way these individuals will also be perceived going forward post COVID is also going to be interesting. I'm sure the gratefulness component, the gratitude component will significantly go up, because in the lockdown, the one thing that I've constantly read on social media is that I feel so grateful for the meals that I'm enjoying. I feel so grateful for the safe environment and the fact that I'm with my family. There are so many people whose families are stranded here and there also, and they just cannot be back. So, until the lockdown was pulled up. All right, all right. Thank you, Savitri. Thank you, Sudarshan. Thank you, Flavian. Yes, I'd love to be connected. Anu is saying in Indian context with Indian companies and Indian managers on management decisions versus actions to curb biases, which one gets priority? Okay, that's a very long question. I have to read it again, which is Indian companies, Indian managers, business manager, biases. Okay, Anu, I'm so sorry. I'm not able to get the options. So you're telling me to choose the priority, but I'm not able to get the options to choose which one is to be a priority. All right. So, but please do connect with me on LinkedIn and let's take this forward. Bindu, thank you. Namrata, thank you. Thank you, everybody. So over to you, Swati, or Biju, whoever.
Yeah, hope there's no other questions from the audience side. So thank you so much for such a detailed session. The topic was very informative, and all the knowledge that you shared with us will be very helpful for the participants and all of us. So thank you, ma'am, and thank you everyone for participating actively. Thank you. Stay safe, guys. Bye.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.